Welcome to This Explainer. If you're currently navigating the midpoint of your career, balancing a relentlessly busy life, and making, well, literally countless decisions every single day, this one is absolutely for you. Today, we're going to decode an invisible force that directly impacts both your professional trajectory and your everyday choices. So, let's jump right in.
So, tell me, are you deciding or are you just reacting? Look, as consumers and as professionals, you really have to ask yourself if the choices you make are truly your own, or if you're kind of just being guided by an invisible hand. In our fast-paced corporate world, it's incredibly easy to just run on autopilot. But the real question is, who exactly programmed that autopilot? I want to share this honestly chilling quote from psychologist Robert Cialdini because it perfectly sets the stage for our explainer today. He warns us about this ability to produce automatic, mindless compliance, a willingness to say yes without thinking first. That is exactly how modern influence bypasses our conscious thought. We're going to unpack exactly how that happens, and more importantly, how you can spot it before you mindlessly agree to something. But to truly grasp modern influence, we actually have to take a quick look backward.
Which brings us to the ancient blueprint.
We need to examine a framework pioneered by Aristotle over 2,000 years ago. He gave us three distinct modes of persuasion, starting with ethos. Now, ethos is all about trust and credibility. Just think about your own workplace for a second. As a leader, you rely heavily on ethos when communicating your future plans to inspire your team. They follow you because they trust your character and your reliability.
Then we have pathos. Pathos creates the emotional environment. It persuades by connecting through sympathy and imagination. Interestingly, our sources point out that this is often highly effective in crisis situations. When feelings of intense uncertainty or even fear are present, it's pathos that guides how an audience reacts and searches for reassurance.
And finally, there's logos, the appeal to logic. This is the absolute foundation of basically every corporate presentation you sit through today. You know the ones, those giant slide decks filled with solid, verified data, charts, and rational arguments, all explicitly designed to systematically convince your intellect.
What's wild is how this 2,000-year-old framework is seamlessly layered to sell you cars right now. Let's break down a modern Subaru commercial from our sources. First up, Ethos. They show an older Subaru sitting in a grandmother's driveway, which immediately signals long-term reliability. Then, Pathos. We get this sweet scene of a grandmother and granddaughter bonding over milkshakes, scored with light, playful music to induce a real sense of serenity. And then finally, Logos drops the data, the statistic that 97% of Subaru vehicles sold in the last 10 years are still on the road. It's this perfect overlapping triad of ancient influence.
Now let's fast forward to the psychological arsenal.
Moving into the 20th century, psychologists began rigorously classifying the specific psychological triggers that actually make us say yes. Robert Cialdini categorized thousands of different compliance tactics into just 6 basic weapons of influence: reciprocity, consistency, social proof, likability, authority, and scarcity. Because your life is insanely busy, your brain relies heavily on these isolated triggers to make rapid-fire decisions.
Let's look at 3 of these weapons in action. First, reciprocity. This is that deeply embedded cultural obligation we all feel to give back when we receive something first. If a vendor drops off an unexpected, highly personalized gift, you suddenly feel duty-bound to return the favor, right? Next is social proof. Imagine you're in an unfamiliar city looking for dinner. You look for a crowded restaurant. We look to the actions of others to dictate our own behavior. And third, consistency. Salespeople love the foot-in-the-door technique. They get you to agree to a tiny initial commitment, knowing full well it dramatically increases the likelihood you'll agree to a much larger request later. Whether you're in the boardroom or just scrolling on your phone, these weapons are highly potent.
And that brings us to the elaboration likelihood model.
All of this builds directly into Richard Petty and John Cacioppo's overarching theory of attitude change, known as the elaboration likelihood model, or ELM. The ELM essentially argues that there are 2 distinct paths to persuasion. The central route involves careful, thoughtful scrutiny of the true merits of an argument. When you process information this way, the attitude change is much more enduring. But then there's the peripheral route. This relies on simple contextual cues, maybe it's how attractive the speaker is, or a catchy song playing in the background, without any deep scrutiny whatsoever. So the crucial takeaway here is whether an argument is being meticulously analyzed through the central route by a focused mind, or passively accepted through the peripheral route by a distracted one.
Today, we've crossed into the subconscious frontier.
The landscape of influence has shifted yet again, and now it's tapping directly into our biology. Which brings up a fascinating question for anyone in business. If we know so much about psychology and peripheral routes, why do traditional surveys and focus groups often completely miss the mark when trying to predict consumer behavior?
Well, the answer lies in the massive gap between what we say and what our brains actually do. Our sources highlight something called the social desirability bias. In a standard focus group, subjects will often hide their true feelings just to appear favorable or appropriate to the researchers in the room. But neuromarketing completely changes the game. It tracks preconscious biological changes. Your neurons fire split-second emotional responses before your conscious mind even has time to process the information. Neuromarketing bypasses our conscious, polite filters entirely, and it measures the raw neurophysiological mechanisms that are actually driving our behavior and our purchases.
Finally, we have to talk about the ethical boundary.
With all of these incredibly powerful tools at our disposal, from ancient rhetoric all the way to subconscious brain tracking, we absolutely must define the critical line between influence and toxicity. It all comes down to intention and transparency. Persuasion is rational, it's transparent, and it's focused on the collective benefit. It's about convincing others to adopt a vision that helps everyone. Manipulation, on the other hand, is the dark side. It's deceptive, coercive, and intentionally exploits the exact cognitive biases we just discussed for pure individual profit. Understanding this contrast is the primary defense mechanism you need to ensure you're leading ethically rather than exploiting people for personal gain.
So, I want to leave you with a final thought to really challenge how you navigate the modern landscape. Every single day, you are both a target of influence and a wielder of it. How will you use these tools to ethically lead your teams in the boardroom, and how will you remain a vigilant consumer at the store? Take a second today to just reflect on your decisions. Are they truly yours? If you found this explainer valuable for your career and your daily life, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now and share it with a colleague who needs to hear this. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and I'll see you in the next explainer.